Hello, welcome Fey and Miles and friends to another episode of Reading with Grams. Today's story is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and we are on chapter 5 at Diagon Alley. Harry woke up early the next morning. Although he could tell it was at daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was just a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed of a giant called Hagrid came to tell me that I was going to a school for wizards. When I opened up my eyes, I'll be out home in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise, and there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking, but he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, tap, tap. All right, Harry mumbled. I'm getting up. He sat up, and Hagrid's heavy coat fell off of him. The hut was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Haggard himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rapping its claw at the window. A newspaper is held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet, so happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that! Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on savaging the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl. Pay him. Hagrid grunted into the sofa. What? He's wanting paying for the delivery of the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of nothing but pockets. A bunch of keys, slug pellets, balls of strings, mint humbugs, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give him 5 nuts, said Hagrid sleepily. Nuts? The little bronze ones. Harry counted out 5 little bronze coins, and the owl held out its leg so he could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then it flew through the open window. Hagrid yawned loudly, sat up, and stretched. Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Gotta get up to London to buy you stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got punctured. Hagrid? Said Hagrid, who pulling on his huge boots. I haven't gotten any money, and you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't be paying for me to go and learn magic. Don't worry about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head. Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything? But if their house was destroyed, they didn't keep their gold in the house, boy. Nah, first steps for us is Gringotts, Wizarding Bank. Have a sausage. They're not bad cold. And I wouldn't say no to a bit of your birthday cake either. Wizards have a bank? Just the ones Gringotts, run by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah, so you'd be madder to try and rob it. I'll tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I gotta visit Gringotts anyways for Dumbledore. Hogwarts business. Hagrid drew himself up proudly. He usually gets me to do important things, stuff for him, fetching you, getting things from Gringotts. Yet he knows he can trust me, see? Got everything. Come on then. Harry followed Hagrid out onto the rocks. The sky was quite clear now, and the sea was gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Said Harry, looking around for another boat. Flew, said Hagrid. Flew? Yeah, but we'll go back in this. Not supposed to use magic now that I got you. They settled down in the boat, Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying. Seems to be ashamed to row, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another of his sideways looks. If I was to speed things up a bit, you wouldn't mind not to mention it at Hogwarts. Of course not, said Harry, eager to see more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off towards land. Why would you be mad to try and rob Gringotts? Said Harry asked. Spells, enchantments, said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. They say there's dragons guarding the high-end security vaults, and then you gotta find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the ground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out, even if you did manage to get your hands on something. Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid reading his newspaper, The Daily Prophet. Harry had learnt from Uncle Vernon that people like to be left alone while they did this, but it was very difficult. He had never had so many questions in his life. Ministry of Magic messing with things up as usual, Hagrid muttered, turning the page. There's a Ministry of Magic? Harry asked, before he could stop himself. Of course, said Hagrid. They'd want they wanted Dumbledore for minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts. Old Cornelius Fudge got the job. Wonder if there ever was one. So he pelts Dumbledore with owls every morning, asking for advice. But what does the Ministry of Magic do? Well, it's their main job is to keep it from the Muggles that there are still witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why, blimey, Harry, everyone be wanting magic solution to their problems. Nah, we're best left alone. At this moment, the boat bumped gently into the harbor wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper and they clambered up to the stone steps onto the streets. Passerby stared a lot at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as anyone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking meters and saying loudly, "See that, Harry? These things muggles dream up, eh, Hagrid?" said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. "Did you say there are dragons in Gringotts?" "Well, so they say," said Hagrid. "Crikey, I'd like a dragon." "You'd like one?" "Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here we go." They had reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand Muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy the tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked to be a canary yellow circus tent. "Still got your letter, Harry?" he asked, counting stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. "Good," said Hagrid. "There is a list of everything you need." Harry unfolded the second paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black. 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. 1 pair of protective glasses, dragon hide or similar. 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothing should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following: A Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory by Albert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magic Herbs and Fungi by Philista Spore. Magic Drafts and Potions by Archness Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protections by Quentin Thimble. Other equipment: 1 wand, 1 cauldron, putrid, standard size 2, 1 set of glass or crystal vials, 1 telescope, and 1 set of brass scales. Students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Can we buy all this in London? Said Harry out loud. If you know where to look, said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before. Although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going, he obviously is not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck at the ticket barrier on the underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains were too slow. I don't know how the muggles manage without magic, he said, as they climbed a broken down escalator which led up to the bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if it could sell you a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of ordinary people. Could there really be piles of wizard gold buried beneath miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spell books and broomsticks? Might this not all be some huge jokes that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humor, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help but trust him. This is it, said Hagrid, coming to a halt the Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place. It was a tiny, grubbing-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop to one side to the record shop on the other side, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most particular feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid steered him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in the corner drinking tiny glasses of sherry, and one of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. The low buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Haggard. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Haggard?" "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Haggard, clamping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. This, can this be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter, what an honor." He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed towards Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scrapping of chairs, and the next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter, can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter, I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hand. I am all of a flutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter, can't you just tell? Diggle's the name." "Dolus Diggle. Hey, I've seen you before," said Harry. Dolus Diggle's top hat fell off his head from his excitement. "You bowed to me once at a shop." "He remembers!" cried Delilus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me." Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crawford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, gasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. "Not that you need it, Potter?" laughed nervously. You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose. I've got to go pick up new books on vampires myself. He looked terrified at the very thought, but the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. Mustn't get on. Lots your buying. Come on, Harry. Doris Crockville shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar and out to a small walled courtyard where there was nothing but dustbins and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. Told you, didn't I? Told you was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling. Is he always that nervous? Yeah, poor bloke, brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of your books, but when he took a year off to get some first-hand experience, they say he met vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the student, scared of his own subject. Now, where's me umbrella? Vampires? Hags? Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting the bricks in the wall above the dustbin. At 3, 2 across, he muttered. Right, stand back, Harry. He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered, it wiggled in the middle, and a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing an archway large enough for Hagrid, an archway onto a cobbled street which twisted and turned out of sight. Welcome, said Hagrid, to Diagon Alley. He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw that the archway shrank instantly back into a solid wall. The sun shone brightly on the stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons all sizes, copper, brass, and pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, said the sign hanging over them. You've been needing one, said Haggard, but we got to get your money first. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. Shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside the apothecary was shaking her head as they passed, saying, Dragon liver, 16 sickles an ounce. They're mad. A low, soft hooting came from the dark shop with a sign saying Earloop Alporium, tawny, screech, barn, brown, and snowy. Several boys about Harry's age had their noses pressed up against a window with broomsticks in it. Look, Harry heard one of them say, the new Nimbus 2000, fastest ever. There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel eyes, trotting piles of spell books, quills, and rolls of parchments, potion bottles, goblins, globes of the moon. Gringotts, said Harry, or Hagrid. They reached. They had reached the snowy white building which towered over the tops of the little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was, yep, that's a goblin, said Haggard quietly as they walked up to the white stone steps towards him. The goblin was a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and Harry noticed very long fingers and feet. They bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with the words graved upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits for the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly for their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there. Like I said, you'd be mad to try to rob it, said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting high on stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count, leading off to the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Haggard and Harry made for the counter. Morning, said Haggard to a free goblin. We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe. You have his key, sir. Got it somewhere, said Haggard, as he started emptying his pockets to the counter, scattering a handful of moldy dog biscuits over the goblin's books of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on the right, weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. Got it, said Harry Haggard at last, holding up the tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. That seems to be in order. And I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore, said Haggard importantly, throwing out his chest. It's about you know what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. Very well, he said, handing it back to Hagrid. I will have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed the dog biscuits back into his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. What's the you know what in Vault 713? Harry asked. Can't tell you that, said Hagrid mysteriously. Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore trusts me. More more in my job's worth to tell you that. Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. There was a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steep downward, and there was a little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurling up the tracks towards them. They climbed in, and Haggard with some difficulty, and were off. At first, they just hurled through the maze of twisting passages. Haggard tried to remember. Harry tried to remember left, right, middle, fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of the passage and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but too late, they plunged even deeper, passing the underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and the floor. I never know, Harry called to Haggard over the noise of the cart. What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite? Stalagmite's got an M in it, said Haggard, and don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick. He did look very green when the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passage wall. Haggard got out and leaned against the wall to stop his trembling knees. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silvers, and heaps of little bronze nuts. All yours, smiled Haggard. All Harry's. It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they would have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained about how much Harry cost them to keep, and all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him buried under London. Haggard helped Harry pile some of it into his bag. The gold ones are galleons, 17 sickles to a galleon, and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough, right? That should be enough for you to keep a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you. He turned to Griphook. Vault 713 now, please. And can we go more slowly. One speed only, said Grip Hook. They were going deeper now, and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurled around tight corners. Then they went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leaned over the side to see what was down at the dark bottom. But Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. The vault 713 had no keyhole. Stand back, Grip Hook, importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. If anyone but the green goblins tried to do that, they'd be stuck through the door and trapped in there, said Grip Hook. How often do you check to see if anyone's inside? Asked Harry. About once every 10 years, Grip Hook said, with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside the top secret security vault. Harry was sure, and he leant forward gently, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least, but at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but he knew better than to ask. Come on, back into the infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if we just keep my mouth shut, said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside of Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he'd ever had in his whole life, more money than the Dudley had ever had. Might as well get your uniform, said Hagrid, nodding towards Madame Malkin's robes for all occasion. Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slip off for a pick-me-up in the leaky cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts. He did look a bit sick. So Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed in mauve. Hogwarts, dear, she said when Harry started to speak. Got the lot here. Another young man is being fitted up just now. In fact, in the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed face was standing on a footstool while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Malkin stood, Harry on a stool next to him, slipped a long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. Hello, said the boy. Hogwarts too? Yes, said Harry. My father's next door buying my books, and my mother's at the street looking at lawns, said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow. Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. Have you got your own broom? The boy went on. No, said Harry. Play Quidditch at all? No, said Harry, wondering what on the earth Quidditch could be. I do. Father said it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house. I must say I agree. Know what house you're going to be in yet? No, said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. Well, no one really does until they get there, but do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family has been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I would leave, wouldn't you? Harry said, wishing he could say something a little bit more interesting. I say, look at that man, said the boy suddenly, nodding towards the front of the window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing at two large ice creams to show that he couldn't come in. That's Hagrid, said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. He works at Hogwarts. Oh, said the boy. I've heard of him. He's sort of a servant, isn't he? He's the gamekeeper, said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. Yes, exactly. I heard he's sort of a savage, lives in a hut in the school grounds, and every now and again he gets drunk and tries to do magic and ends up fire to his bed. I think he's brilliant, said Harry coldly. Do you? Said the boy. He's with a slight sneer. Why is he with you? Where are your parents? They're dead, said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with this boy. Oh, sorry, said the other, not sounding sorry at all. But they were our kind, weren't they? They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean. I really don't think they should let the other short end of you. They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get a letter. Imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyways? But before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, That's you, Duns, my dear." And Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate the ice cream Hagrid had bought him, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. What's up? Said Hagrid. Nothing, lied. Harry lied. They stopped by They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changes colors as he wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, Hagrid, what's Quidditch? Why me, Harry? I keep forgetting how little you know. Not knowing about Quidditch. Don't make me feel worse, said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy in Madame Malkin's. He said people from the Muggle family shouldn't even be allowed in. You're not from a Muggle family. But if he'd known who you were, he'd grown up knowing your name. If his parents are wizarding folks, you saw him in the legal cauldron. Anyways, what does he know about him? Some of the best I ever saw were the ones with magic in them, were a long line of muggles. Look at your mom. Look at what she had for her sister. So what is Quidditch? It's our sports, wizard sports. It's like football in the Muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch. Played up in the air on broomsticks, and there's four balls. Sort of harder to explain the rules. And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff? Schoolhouses. There are four. Everyone says Hufflepuffs are a lot duffers, but I'll bet I'll be in Hufflepuff, said Harry gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You knew who was. You know who was at Hogwarts years and years ago, said Hagrid. They brought Harry's school books in the shop called a Flourish of Lots, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling with books as large as paving stones bound in leather. Books the sizes of postage stamps covered in silk, books full of particular symbols, and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Haggard almost had to drag Harry away from curses and counter curses. Bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges, hair loss, jelly legs, tongue tying, and much, much more by Professor Vindictus Vernon. I was trying to find how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that that's not a good idea, but you're not to use magic in the Muggle world except on very special circumstances, said Hagrid. And anyways, you couldn't work any of them curses yet. You still need a lot more studying before you get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. It says pewter on your list, but they got a nice set of scales for weighing potions ingredients and a collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecary, which was fascinating enough to make up for its horrible smell. A mixture of bad eggs and rotted cabbage. Barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor. Jars of herbs, dried roots, and bright powders lined the walls. Bundles with the feathers, strings of fangs, and snarled claws hung from the ceiling. While Haggard asked the man behind the counter for a supply of some basic potions ingredients for Harry, Harry himself examined silvered unicorn horns at 21 galleons each, and minuscule, glittery black beetle eyes, 5 nuts a scoop. Outside the apothecary, Haggard checked Harry's list again. Just your wand left. Oh, yeah, and I still haven't got you your birthday present. Harry felt himself go red. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Tell you what, I'll go get your animal. Not a toad. Toads went out of fashion years ago. You'd be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They make me sneeze. I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're dead useful, yet carry your post and everything. 20 minutes later, they left Isle of Pop's Emporium, which had been dark and full of rustling and flickering jewel-bright eyes. Harry now carried a large cage with a beautiful snowy owl, fast asleep with her head under her wing. He couldn't stop stammering his thanks, sounding like Professor Quill. Don't mention it, said Haggard gruffly. Don't expect you've had a lot of presents from them Dursleys. Just Ollivanders left the only place for wands, Ollivanders, and you've got to have the best wand. A magic wand. This is what Harry had been really looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby. Peeling gold letters over the door read Ollivanders, maker of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand laid on a faded purple cushion in the dusty window. A tinkling bell rang somewhere deep in the shop as they stepped inside a tiny place, except empty except for a single spiny chair that Haggard sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as though he had entered a very strict library. He swallowed a lot of new questions which had just occurred to him and looked instead at the thousands of narrowly shaped boxes piled right neatly right up to the ceiling. For some reason, the back of his neck prickled. The very dust and silence in here seemed to tingle with some secret magic. Good afternoon, said a soft voice. Harry jumped. Haggard must have jumped too, because there was a loud crunching noise, and he got quickly off the spindly chair. An old man was standing before them. His wide, pale eyes shined like moons through the gloom of the shop. Hello, said Harry awkwardly. Ah, yes, said the man. Yes, yes, I thought I'd be seeing you soon, Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes. It seemed like only yesterday she was in here herself buying her first one. 10 1/4 inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he would blink. Those silvery eyes were a little bit creepy. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches, pliable, a little more powerful and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it. It was really the one that chooses the wizard, of course. Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. And that's where Mr. Ollivander touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long white finger. I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did that, he said softly. 13 1/2 inches. Powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands, well, if I'd known what that wand was going to go out into the world and do. He shook his head, and then, to Harry's relief, spotted Haggard. Rubius Haggard, how nice to see you again. Oak, 16 inches, rather bendy, wasn't it? It was, sir, yes. Good one, that one. But I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled, said Mr. Ollivander, suddenly stern. Yes, they did, said Haggard, shuffling his feet. I still got the pieces, though, he added brightly. But you don't use them, Mr. Ollivander said sharply. Oh, no, sir, said Haggard quickly. Harry noticed as he gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Haggard a piercing look. Well, now, Mr. Potter, let me see. He pulled out a long tape measure with a silver marking out of his pocket. Which is your wand arm? Well, I'm right-handed. Hold out your arm. That's it. He measured Harry's from shoulder to finger, then his wrist to elbow and shoulder to floor, knee to armpit, and round his head. As he measured, he said, "Every Ollivander wand has a core of powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hair, phoenix tail feathers, and heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are quite the same. And of course, you will never get such good results with another wizard's wand." Harry suddenly realized that the tape measuring between his nostrils, was doing it on his own. Mr. Ollivander was fiddling around the shelves, taking down boxes. "That will do," he said, and the tape measure crumbled into a heap on the floor. "Right then, Mr. Potter, try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring, 9 inches, nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a wave." Harry took the wand, and feeling foolish, he waved it around a bit, but Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. "Maple and phoenix feathers, 7 inches, quite whippy. Try." Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. "No, no, here's an ebony and unicorn hair, 8.5 inches springy. Go on, try it out." Harry tried and tried. He had no idea what Mr. Ollivander was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on a spindly chair, but the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. "Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry. We'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder now, yes, why not? Unusual combination, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple." Harry took the wand, and he felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. He raised the wand above his head, brought it swishing down as through the dusty air, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end of like fireworks. Throw, throw dancing spots of lights on the wall. Hagrid whooped and clapped as Mr. Ollivander cried, "Oh, bravo! Yes, indeed! Oh, very good! Well, well, well! How curious! How very curious!" He put Harry's wand back into the box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, "Curious, curious." "Sorry," said Harry, "but what's curious?" Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happened that the phoenix who tells feather is in your wand gave another feather, just one other. And it's very curious indeed that you should be destined for this one when its brother gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. "Yes, 13.5 inches, you. Curiously indeed how these things happen. The wand chooses the wizard. Remember, I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, but great." Harry shivered. He wasn't sure he liked Mr. Ollivander too much. He paid 7 gold galleons for his wand, and Mr. Ollivander bowed them from his shop. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky as Harry and Hagrid made their way back down Diagon Alley, back through the walls, back through the leaky cauldron, now empty. Harry did not speak at all as they walked down the road. He didn't even notice how much people were gaping at them on the underground, laden as they were with all their funny-shaped packages, with a sleepy snowy owl on Harry's lap, up an escalator and out into the Patagon station. Harry only realized where they were when Hagrid tapped him on the shoulder. "Time to get a bite to eat before your train leaves," he said. He brought Harry a hamburger, and they sat down on plastic seats to eat them. Harry kept looking around. Everything looked so strange somehow. "You all right, Harry? You're very quiet," said Hagrid. Harry wasn't sure he could explain. He just had the best birthday of his life. And yet, as he chewed his hamburger, trying to find the words, "Everyone thinks I'm special," he said at last. "All these people in the leaky cauldron, Professor Quirrell, Mr. Ollivander, but I don't really know anything about magic at all. How can they expect great things?" I'm famous, and I can't even remember what I'm famous for. I don't know what happened when that night my parents died. Haggard leaned across the table. Behind the wild beard and eyebrows, he wore a very kind smile. Don't you worry, Harry. You'll learn fast enough. Everyone starts at the beginning at Hogwarts. You'll just be fine. Just be yourself. I know it's hard. You've been singled out, and it's always hard. But you'll have a great time at Hogwarts. I did. Still do. As a matter of fact, Hagrid hooked Harry onto the train that would take him back to the Dursleys. Then he handed him an envelope. Your ticket for Hogwarts, 1st September, King's Cross. It's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your L. She'll know where to find me. See you soon, Harry. The train pulled out of the station. Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window, but he blinked and Hagrid had gone. And that is the end of chapter 5. I hope you guys enjoyed today's story. And Fey and Miles Gram loves you. I can't wait to see you again. And new friends, if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe so you're notified when the next chapter is out. Till next time, bye.